Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Alrighty, everybody. What is up, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the one and only GSMC Podcast Network. I am your Thursday and Sunday host, Grady Duggan, and I have a fantastic episode planned for you guys. It is my mock draft 2.0, which I am very excited to go through this mock draft with you guys once again. I think it's important to do it maybe 2 to 3 times as we inch closer to the season. You know, news starts coming out about players that are maybe hurt or opting out or getting injured throughout training camp. So this is a very important practice to continue to do so that you can be fully prepared for what goes on in your fantasy football drafts. So I'm going to be walking you through pick by pick, kind of telling you my thoughts on whether it's the computer's draft picks or what I'm thinking on my draft pick, where I'm valuing some people, if there's an opportunity to pick up a sleeper where I am, or maybe someone who might be tempted to be a reach at one point. So there's a lot of good things you can learn in a fantasy football mock draft before your draft really happens. So let's get to it. I am going to do a 2020 season, not going to do a dynasty. I'm doing point per reception. I've talked about that before. I just think that is a much better scoring system for fantasy football. And then I'm going to do a snake draft. So first pick ends up being the last pick in the second round, or in the next round, not necessarily second round. And I am going to do a 12-team league. Now, this is what I personally think are the best settings for fantasy football. Obviously, every league is different. Whoever your commissioner has kind of the say in this. So every league is very different. I'm going to hit the randomize button for my draft position, you know. Don't want to be, okay, I got the first pick. I'm not going to do that. That's funny. Okay, we hit randomize, and I am the 5th pick. You know, the first pick, I just feel like I wouldn't be able to give you guys as much good insight because it's kind of a interesting pick to have. You get Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley. You kind of get your pick of the litter at the first pick, but then you wait a long time for your next pick, and it's not as advertised, in my opinion. We're going to go down to the roster positions: 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and 1 tight end. We're going to do 1 flex position, 4 bench players. A lot of the times you might have more, especially in a season like this with COVID-19, and players might be getting hurt or sick a little more than often. You might have more than 1 bench player. But for this episode, I'm not going to get too deep into my bench. I will continue to give insight about certain players, but that's just not needed for a mock draft. 1 defense and 1 kicker, of course. So let's go. Starting this draft, and it kind of skips ahead and shows me the computer's picks. So I will try and go back each time and kind of walk you through what the computer did and maybe why I think certain players were picked, or why I think they shouldn't have been picked there. So that'll be kind of how I am doing things in this episode. So let's start. I'm doing a fantasy football mock draft through Draft Wizard, the Fantasy Pros. It's a really easy tool to get the hang of. So it has been very, very helpful when I do these mock drafts. So the first round is up. Christian McCaffrey went 1. That's kind of obvious. He is an absolute animal. He's going to be one of the best, if not the best, fantasy football contributor in this season. And then you got Saquon Barkley, Michael Thomas, and Ezekiel Elliott. Now, what's interesting here is you can go back and forth with whether receiver or running back is the better choice to go with in the first round. I've said in prior episodes, I prefer, this is just a preference, everyone's different, but I do prefer to go with a running back first. I think there's more productive receivers than there are running backs. If you can get a good running back in the first couple rounds who's really a workhorse type running back and will get the bulk of the carries, can produce in the passing game as well, that I think that's a little more beneficial than having the Michael Thomas or Devontae Adams or Julio Jones. I mean, all those guys are great and they're going to be number one receivers and that's what you want. But I think you can kind of wait 1 or 2 rounds with the wide receiver position and be able to still be good to go. So, like I said, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Michael Thomas, and Ezekiel Elliott are off the board. I'm looking at a board of Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Julio Jones, and Tyreek Hill. Now, if you go to the quarterback position, I've talked about how the only people who really are worth the pick in the quarterback position in the first round is going to be Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. And at the 4 or 5 position, the 5th draft pick, I just personally don't know if I would go quarterback, even though those guys are absolutely phenomenal. I just don't know if it is worth it. I think you can get value down the road at the quarterback position and be able to get someone that's going to contribute in a major, major way. And I honestly am going to go against what Draft Wizard is saying on this. They said an 85% of experts, quote unquote, would be picking Alvin Kamara in this exercise with the 5th overall pick. And I'm high on Alvin Kamara, but personally, I'm going to go with Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings. I think he's going to have an even bigger role than he already did now that Stephon Diggs is gone. I think every year they've kind of leaned on him more and more. So he's going to be getting the bulk of the action in this offense. And I think without Stephon Diggs and kind of the more of the weight on the passing game put on Adam Thielen with Kirk Cousins at helm, I think they're going to need Dalvin Cook to really step up. He had his first 1,000-yard rushing season last year, and I think that is only going to get higher. He also had over 500 yards within the pass game, so he is a threat in the pass game. I think he gives you a little bit more than Alvin Kamara does. So that is my first pick at the 5th overall draft pick. I'm going Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this is going to sim the next little bit for me, and I will read you some of the guys who went since my last pick. The only quarterback I'm seeing off the board is Patrick Mahomes. I'm Patrick Mahomes. So Lamar Jackson is still there if I chose to go the quarterback route. I'm seeing Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry went right after I picked Dalvin Cook. Derrick Henry is another solid choice. The thing with him is just you saw him at the end of the season putting up 30 to 40 carries a game, and is he really going to be able to do that for 16 games, a full NFL season? Especially, how much can you trust Ryan Tannehill behind at quarterback? So, here we are. Who else went? Joe Mixon went. Clyde Edwards-Helaire of the Kansas City Chiefs, rookie out of LSU went, and now that is an interesting pick, and I want to talk about that for a little bit. He has been thrust into the starting position for the Kansas City Chiefs after Damian Williams, their starting running back, decided to opt out of the season. So people were already very high on him. Now he's going into a Kansas City Chiefs offense, which is explosive to say the least, and he's getting a round 1 pick just off of that. So that is impressive, and that is something to watch out. With the first pick in the second round, Travis Kelce went. Interesting that he went before George Kittle. George Kittle is right here available for me still with the 8th pick in the second round, but I do not think I'm going to be going tight end quite yet. Miles Sanders and Nick Chubb also went a little bit before me, not too surprising. So now we get to my pick. I already have Dalvin Cook. There's DeAndre Hopkins, Allen Robinson, and George Kittle. I'm going to go to the wide receiver position. And, there's a handful of guys with DJ Moore, Kenny Golladay, who I am big on. Josh Jacobs is there. And honestly, I'm between Josh Jacobs and DeAndre Hopkins. This is a tough one to me. This really is tough. Part of me wants to go Josh Jacobs because the Raiders are so dependent on the run. John Gruden loves to establish the running game when he can, and it's kind of a play-action pass offense, so that running game needs to get established, and Josh Jacobs probably would have been the Rookie of the Year last year if he didn't get hurt towards the end of the season, so he is a very viable option there, but the thing that makes DeAndre Hopkins so attractive in this position, one, not only do I already have a solid running back, so it would be nice to have both. But DeAndre Hopkins is now an Arizona Cardinal, and I think Kyler Murray is only going to take a step forward in his development in year 2. And to have, in this air raid offense that the Cardinals run, to have DeAndre Hopkins is going to be huge. So this pick is, DeAndre Hopkins is just too good to pass up here in this new spread air raid offense that he's playing in under Cliff Kingsbury with Kyler Murray and quarterback. So I'm going DeAndre Hopkins with my second pick in this fantasy football draft. I'm honestly a little surprised that he was still there. I thought he would go a little bit before me. And now I do want to talk about right after me, Kenny Golladay was drafted, and then George Kittle. So right out of the gate, you have Travis Kelce and George Kittle both going in the second round. That gives you an idea of where the tight end market is being valued so far this year. It's something to pay attention to because after those two, not that there's a huge drop-off with Ertz or maybe Gronk if you want to run that kind of gamble, but it's just seeing where people are valuing those two guys because those guys are going to be huge pieces of their teams. Now, as we move it forward, Lamar Jackson was the last pick in the second round. Honestly, I don't think he will be lasting that long in fantasy football drafts. I think he will be off the board much, much earlier than the last pick in the second round. I think people are going to value him in the kind of first round 7 to 8 pick range. Patrick Mahomes will be a very, very similar case. But I have Dalvin Cook. I have DeAndre Hopkins. So now we're going to look at my third pick. I'm seeing DJ Moore and Juju Smith-Schuster as the top people on the board. Todd Gurley is also here as a running back. Zach Ertz is here, but I'm not quite really sold that Zach Ertz is a third round draft pick. And, I'm going to go with Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju Smith-Schuster had a down year last year after having Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges at the quarterback position. So didn't have as much production, but Ben Roethlisberger is back. He's got two great compliments in Deontay Johnson and James Washington. I think this offense is going to take a huge leap back to where they were in 2018. And if you go look at Juju Smith-Schuster's 2018 stats, he was right up there with some of the best in the league. He had a down year, like I said, last year. But, in 2018, he showed what he can do in this league. Put up almost 1,500 yards, 7 touchdowns, so was really one of the top contributors for fantasy football. And I think he's maybe not going to quite get 1,500 yards this year, but he will be back up in that range a little bit closer now that Ben Roethlisberger is back and healthy. So I think the Steelers will be back and just a better all-around team, and I'm going to go with Juju Smith-Schuster. So that's 2 receivers, one running back. And now for my 4th overall pick, which is the 8th pick. Let's look a little bit before me. Todd Gurley went, Leonard Fournette, Zach Ertz. So all guys, Leonard Fournette, is someone I would kind of avoid. I just don't think I have any trust in the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. So now we're looking in the 4th round, 8th pick. Melvin Gordon in Denver is an interesting option. Keenan Allen is also here. So 2 guys I am definitely going to be considering. I think I would like Melvin Gordon over Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen seems to get hurt a lot. Who knows what's going to go on with their quarterback room with Justin Herbert or Tyrod Taylor. I kind of want a running back now that I have 2 wide receivers. Now I'm seeing Melvin Gordon and James Conner here. I'm going to take a look at the tight end position. Darren Waller is not a bad option if we're being quite honest. John Gruden loves to find the ball or get the ball to his tight end. And honestly, I might value that over a running back right now since I already have Dalvin Cook. There's James Conner, Melvin Gordon, and Le'Veon Bell are the top 3. Out of those 3, I'd probably go Melvin Gordon personally. James Conner is a very solid pick. He's not going to do you wrong too often. One of the interesting ones is I'm looking at all positions. They do have Dak Prescott there. While I do think Dak Prescott will be a very valuable fantasy football quarterback this year, one of maybe a top 10 fantasy football quarterback in Mike McCarthy's offense, and I think he's just got a lot of opportunity to grow. I don't think I would really put a quarterback in the 4th round. I think that's too early, and I'm going to go with Darren Waller of the Las Vegas Raiders. He had a huge year, kind of busted onto the scene last year and was kind of one of the staples in that Raiders offense and really just showed what he can do in this league and what John Gruden likes to do with his tight ends and how much he likes to utilize him. Darren Waller was over 1,100 yards, so really a ball hawk for that Las Vegas, or at the time, Oakland Raiders offense. So with the 4th overall pick, I am going tight end Darren Waller. A little bit of a risk, not as big of a name. I might be able to look for Evan Ingram or Hunter Henry, but I'm going to go with Darren Waller in this instance. Now, going into the 5th round, the 5th overall pick, we're going to go back to all, and Dak Prescott is still there. So very good I didn't pick him, and I'm going to say Melvin Gordon is also still there. So now if we go back to my team, we are going to take a look at who I have drafted so far and kind of be able to look at where I stand and where I need to look at and kind of what positions I need to focus on. And obviously I have Juju Smith-Schuster and DeAndre Hopkins. I think I want to go running back with this pick to kind of complement Dalvin Cook. And Melvin Gordon and James Conner are still there. Mark Ingram is also an interesting option, but I don't think that is the one I'm going to be going with. If we're going to go over, see what wide receivers are there. Terry McLaurin is there with the Washington Redskins, or I'm sorry, just the Washington Football Club. I should not have said that, but I don't really trust that offense. Who knows what's going to happen. It's between Dak Prescott and Melvin Gordon for me. And I think I'm going to go Melvin Gordon. I think I'll be able to I want to get Dak Prescott, and if he's their next pick, that's the route I'm going. But if he's not there, it's not the end of the world. I will be able to get quarterback value later in the draft. So I'm not going to take the risk on that kind, or maybe not a risk, but that's not the direction I'm going to be going with. And he has been taken. So Dak Prescott got taken. It's in the 6th round, the 8th pick in the 6th round, and Dak Prescott was taken in the fourth pick of the 6th round. So kind of shows you where quarterbacks are being valued in this fantasy football season. So now we're going to take a look at who is here. We have Marvin Jones, David Montgomery, Devin Singletary at the running back position. But because I went Melvin Gordon last pick, I'm not going to be going running back. I think I'm leaning towards wide receiver and getting a quarterback with my next pick. Quarterbacks right now are Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and Deshaun Watson. And I just don't want to pick Russell Wilson in the 6th round. I think I can get some value later in the draft. If we take a look, I could still get Evan Ingram and get a 2 tight end system, which I have harped on. how valuable that can be. A flex tight end and a tight end position is huge if you have two very good, productive tight ends. But I'm going to go Marvin Jones of the Detroit Lions. I think that is a passing offense. Before Matthew Stafford got hurt last year, he was a top 10 quarterback, arguably having an MVP season, and this offense is someone who likes to throw. They're going to have a better run game, which is going to open up the pass game more this season. So I'm going to go Marvin Jones. Also, it's just a team that they play in a competitive division, a lot of long games that they need to fight through. So as we get closer to this season, I think the Detroit Lions are going to surprise some people, and I'm going to go Marvin Jones here. So that is my 6th round pick. Now stick around after the break, and we're going to continue with this fantasy football.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, folks. Grady is back, and we are going to continue on with this fantasy football mock draft. I hope you have liked some of the information I have put forth so far. And let me go just give you a little recap of the team I have so far on paper. We have Dalvin Cook, Melvin Gordon, DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marvin Jones, and Darren Waller. So really, I just need a flex and a quarterback position. My main roster has kind of filled out very nicely. This is a roster I would be very excited for if it was in real life. Fortunately, it's not, but that's okay. We're moving on. And if we go a look right above, I'm in the 7th round, 5th pick overall, kind of bummed as I look forward and I see Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and Deshaun Watson off the board right before my pick, and I am planning on going quarterback this pick. And that just shows you, while I think you can get value waiting on a quarterback, which I still think I can get a good quarterback for fantasy football, it just shows you have to know when to strike and when to get that right guy. Because if I talked about getting Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson, and I said 6th round just isn't worth it, and they just went boom, boom, boom right in front of my eyes before I could pick. So it is, you got to just pick and choose your battles, kind of where you want to really value these certain guys. Now, do I necessarily think I made a mistake? No. But it's a learning curve, which is exactly why we do these exercises. It's exactly why we do a fantasy football mock draft before these real fantasy football drafts get going. So now let's get to the nitty-gritty, the quarterback position. I don't want to wait any longer. I don't want to risk getting into kind of that, because right now it looks kind of like these top 7 to 9 players or quarterbacks are off the board, and I don't want to risk getting into that 15 to 20 round range. I want to stay right where I am. So the quarterback position is going to be my 7th pick. Now I'm looking at the quarterback room right now. There's Carson Wentz, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, and Josh Allen. I'm going to tell you right now, Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz are off the board. Now, both of those guys are going to be productive this year. Carson Wentz, the reason I am not going to go with him here is he hasn't been able to stay healthy that much. Who knows what the Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver room is going to be like this year. And with Matt Ryan, I just don't have much confidence with the Atlanta Falcons. The thing with them that does give him an edge over some quarterbacks that are on maybe not so good teams is that they are a passing team. He is always throwing the ball. They have always been a pass first team. He has Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. So he has receivers, and he's a quarterback that even with bad teams has always been able to put up numbers. So it's not a bad pick, but with Drew Brees and Josh Allen still on the board, that is the direction I'm going to go with one of those two. And now Drew Brees, I mean, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for a long, long time. One of the best to ever do it in our generation, and you can't go wrong with him. But with this pick, I am going to be going Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. He's young. He has one of the biggest arms in the NFL, and he's only been getting better and better every year in the NFL. He really came out of his shell last year and took the Buffalo Bills to the playoffs, and I think the Buffalo Bills are going to have the best chance they've had in a long time to win the division. Tom Brady's out. It's a whole different world in New England. While they do still have one of the better defenses in the league, I think that offense might mightily struggle, especially during the beginning when is Cam Newton still going to be getting used to the offense? Is it going to be good? It's just a lot of question marks with that New England offense. So Josh Allen, he's got Devin Singletary as a very reliable running back. Now he's got Zach Moss as a nice complement to Devin Singletary. He's also got Stephon Diggs, one of the best receivers in the NFL, gets a fresh start in Buffalo. I think there was a lot of things going on in Minnesota for Stephon Diggs that he just wasn't that happy there, and I think he fits this offense a lot better. He's a speed guy, so he likes to be able to burn DBs over the top, and Josh Allen has one of the strongest arms in the NFL. So enough talking, and I am doing it. Drafting Josh Allen with my 7th overall pick in this fantasy football mock draft, and I'm happy about that. The thing with Josh Allen is he can also hurt teams with his legs. That's something that kind of people take for granted. They don't really think about, but he is very, very capable of extending plays on his feet. So now I have my full roster set up. Josh Allen, Dalvin Cook, Melvin Gordon, DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marvin Jones, and Darren Waller. One thing I want to talk about as I look at this team, I noticed that Melvin Gordon, DeAndre Hopkins, and Juju Smith-Schuster are all on Week 8 buys. So I talked about this with my last mock draft. Bye weeks are an interesting thing. I wouldn't base your draft around it or think too much with it because it's not that big of a deal. But a strategy that some people like to do is stack bye weeks. So you kind of take a loss in 1 week. And now you don't have to do that. And sometimes you can win that week, and that's just a bigger bonus to you. It really doesn't matter. Don't let it define your fantasy football draft. Don't think about it too much, but getting more than one or maybe even more than two, like in this situation that I didn't mean to do, as a same week buy type thing, it's not the worst thing. If you see that and you did it on accident, don't freak out because it can work out into your advantage. So wouldn't pay too much attention to it, but also don't shy away from it. So now I'm looking at my flex position now. Obviously not going to go quarterback. I don't really like carrying two quarterbacks on my roster. We go to the running back room. We have David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, and Raheem Mostert of the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to go to the wide receiver position, and there's Sterling Shepard, John Brown, and Anthony Miller, as well as Darius Slayton. I'm not going to do Anthony Miller, and I'm not going to do John Brown. If I do any receiver, it's going to be Sterling Shepard, but I kind of like the idea of having a third running back with this pick. And I think David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears, if they really finally dedicate the run game to him, he is going to be huge for Matt Nagy's offense. But last year, he kind of got thrown around with that running back by committee type of offense or type of running back room, and it really hurt his production. So it's something to think about or take into consideration when you are preparing for your fantasy football draft with the Chicago Bears offense. DeAndre Swift is someone I am very high on. I think he could really, really outperform a lot of people's expectations, especially I think he is going to take over that number one spot from Kerryon Johnson and be that main running back in Detroit. So this is really a tough position to be in. It's between DeAndre Swift and David Montgomery. And to be honest, I think I'm going to go David Montgomery. The reason is because I already have Marvin Jones, and the Detroit Lions, while I am high on them, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. They're still not a team I would want multiple guys on. There's very little team. I like to avoid that. I really do. I do like to avoid not the best teams in the NFL. I still try to avoid that. And I already have Marvin Jones and that would be another bye week to look into. That's Marvin Jones and DeAndre Swift. So kind of one thing to pay attention to. I'm going to go David Montgomery because if he is that number one back in Chicago, he's going to be a solid running back too in the fantasy football world. And if I could get him in the 8th round when I already have Dalvin Cook and Melvin Gordon, your team is shaping up very, very nicely. So I just saw a steal notification come up in my corner. Experts rank David Montgomery at 62, and I got him at 91. So that just shows you where experts think he's going to take that next jump and where you could potentially get him, because a lot of people are not going to think of Chicago Bears as a big-time fantasy football producer. And DeAndre Swift, just a note, because I was talking about drafting him instead of David Montgomery. DeAndre Swift, I am the 5th pick in the 9th round this time, and DeAndre Swift went the 1st pick in the 9th round. So I have, and obviously flex positions are something you can kind of switch in. It doesn't always have to be the same guy. Right now I have David Montgomery in the flex just because that's where I picked it. So I'm going to like to look at the tight end or wide receiver position to kind of see where it is. It's a very similar wide receiver room. Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Anthony Miller, and Golden Tate. So a lot of New York Giants, which is interesting. I think the New York Giants have a chance to be a much better team than people are expecting. If you look at the the tight end room, it's Jared Cook and Austin Hooper, who honestly, I think Jared Cook would be the better pick of that one, because who knows how the Cleveland is going to use Austin Hooper. He's going to be that number one tight end. But they also have David Njoku, and I just don't think, if I were to go 2 tight ends, I probably will draft a second tight end at some point much later. But if I were going to go 2 tight ends in the first kind of 10 rounds, I would like to go much, much higher and get 2 more dominant players. So now looking at this, I'm going to go Sterling Shepard with the New York Giants. I think he is going to be a great pick, because the New York Giants, I think Daniel Jones is going to take a huge step forward in his development. They have Saquon Barkley, but they're going to want to take some pressure off of Saquon Barkley. And I just think that Sterling Shepard has the chance to really be that number one guy. They have Golden Tate, but Golden Tate's a slot receiver, kind of a possession guy. Sterling Shepard, they're going to be able to do more with. Jason Garrett's coming over from the Dallas Cowboys for their offensive coordinator. So that is something that I would go with, especially with the picks there. I wouldn't want to get Darius Slayton that high, though I do think Darius Slayton could be a sleeper. But that is my reasoning for going Sterling Shepard. I think he could have a very surprising year. So now we're in the 10th round. This is kind of getting into my bench, and this is where you want to take some calculated risks in a way. Kind of note right here, Aaron Rodgers is still on the board. Don't expect that to happen. So that's just one thing I'm saying. But I have a flex. This is a position or a draft pick. I'm probably going to want to go running back or tight end. I think my receivers are very strong, and they're not going to change. The receivers available, I don't think, are going to change too much at this time period. So I think I'm going to go Phillip Lindsay of the Denver Broncos. I think that is too much of a... Actually, wait a second. No, I'm not. I just looked over my roster and I have Melvin Gordon. I'm not going to go first and second string running backs on one team. So that is also something to pay attention to as you pick. Phillip Lindsay is a very attractive fantasy football piece. And if you're getting him in the later rounds, yes, he is absolutely, he's kind of that third down passing. He's that guy that they can trust out of the backfield in the passing game. Huge potential. And if I didn't have Melvin Gordon, he would be my pick right here, 100%. But because I already have the kind of workhorse in the Denver Broncos offense, that is not something I am going to do. So I'm going to go over to the wide receiver and tight end position. N'Keal Harry is here from the New England Patriots, who I think could be the best receiver on that team. But because I think I could get him the next round, and even if I can't, there's still Curtis Samuel on the board of the Carolina Panthers. So I'm going to go to the tight end position, and I'm going to go with Jared Cook. I looked at him earlier in the draft, and I said, not quite here, but a little later I would think about it, and that's what's happening. I'm going Jared Cook with my 10th overall pick, and as we move to the 11th round, I am the 5th overall pick, and now I'm going to go back over to the wide receiver position, and N'Keal Harry is still there, so that is a huge option. Preston Williams of the Miami Dolphins has also jumped up, but I think I'm a little higher on the potential of N'Keal Harry. He had a slow rookie season after he was hurt, but I think Cam Newton and him are working out in the offseason. They're going to have that chemistry, and I think N'Keal Harry has a chance to really make that jump into the number one receiver that the New England Patriots are pushing him towards and what they want to have happen out of that. Another interesting pick is Latavius Murray of the New Orleans Saints. That could be a very good option and something that honestly I didn't know was there, and it could be a little bit better. And you know what? Now that I think about it, there is a chance. There's Robbie Anderson and Preston Williams in front of N'Keal Harry. This is risky, but having a possibly fourth running back that could produce, I think the Saints like to use multiple running backs, and in this time in the draft, this is the time to kind of take some gambles. I'm going to go Latavius Murray strictly because I think N'Keal Harry will be there at my next pick. So I'm not quite going to go where I thought, and I just saw him get picked. There is what you pay for when you do things like that. It's just something to pay attention to, and it happens in fantasy football. You can't always get what you want. And boy, did Grady just learn that the hard way. So now we're in the 12th round. That kind of bums me out. I was looking forward to getting N'Keal Harry, but he went 6 picks in front of me. So something in the 11th round. See where he's being valued. Okay, but now that I went another running back, I am going to be going wide receiver here. And I'm going to go Curtis Samuel of the Carolina Panthers. I think he could have a big year. They're now in a kind of spread it out air raid offense that Matt Rule brought over from Baylor. And I think that's going to be huge for that offense. Teddy Bridgewater honestly has shown that he is just a winner wherever he goes. Let's be honest. So that is one reason to kind of look out for the Carolina Panthers. I think Curtis Samuel continues to get better and better every year. And he's someone that, as much as he's a wide receiver, but he can kind of run like a running back. They a lot of the times use him out of the backfield or kind of like a swing option and around the back as kind of like a jet sweep type player. So I am going to go with Curtis Samuel as my 12th round pick. Now on my 13th round, I'm looking above, and the New England Patriots defense just got picked. So that's one thing to pay attention to, because when the first defense starts going, Baltimore just got picked too. So when the first defense starts going, that's when they all start falling. And that's when you want to jump on. You don't need to get it too high of a defense, but you want a solid one. You don't want to be, some people like to stream their defenses. I like to have kind of a solid one throughout the year so you don't have to worry about it. It kind of saves your waiver wire position, which is something you need to pay attention to in fantasy football. So stick around after the break, and we are going to be getting into the last bit of this fantasy football mock.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, everybody. We are back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Let's get back to the end of this mock draft we have been putting together. I think I've given you some good insight of where people are getting valued, where people are maybe seeing a little bit of a reach, or why I would pick certain people at certain spots, or maybe kind of avoid certain people. So let's run through my roster so far. We have Josh Allen, Dalvin Cook, Melvin Gordon, DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marvin Jones, Darren Waller, and then in the flex position, David Montgomery. If you go down to the bench, I have Sterling Shepard, Jared Cook, Latavius Murray, and Curtis Samuel. So that is all for my skill position players. Usually I would do 5 to 6 bench spots. Sorry, I lost my thought there a little bit. But because with this exercise, I just want to be able to get in, get out, give you my insight of what I'm thinking and where I'm thinking about certain players. I just did 4 with a quick one, but especially with a season with COVID surrounding this, there's probably in most leagues going to be at least 6 bench spots, or maybe an extra IR or spot or hurt position, because who knows when people are going to be going down. So these bench players get more and more important and get more crucial to be or to get that right spot. So let me just, before I get into my defense and kicking position, I'm going to go over who's still on the board, where I would value them, why they would be a good pick, just a few guys before I get to the last 2 picks. I'm seeing Aaron Rodgers on the board, which don't expect that to happen. Cam Newton is still here, which would not surprise me if he's there at the end of the draft. But that is one, if you just already have a quarterback, you want to take a little gamble and put him on your bench and just put him in the stock position, see where he can be in 3-4 weeks in the season. And who knows, you might have a very, very productive quarterback and a lot better New England Patriots offense and team if Cam Newton performs how he has performed in years past. If that happens, the New England Patriots are a team to worry about. So that's someone, if you have an extra spot, you can just stash him. That's not a bad thing to have. Go to the running back position. There's Jamal Williams, the Green Bay Packers, Giovanni Bernard, Adrian Peterson. Honestly, no one really here that I would kind of harp home to or really, really talk about. Giovanni Bernard has, I think his best years are past him, especially with Joe Mixon being such a dominant force in that Cincinnati Bengals offense. Just not really worth it. Jamal Williams, the Packers running back room is always such a just running back by committee interest, because it's so Aaron Rodgers focused that running back, it seems like that is a position they're always trying to figure out who's the guy. It seems like 3 weeks it'll be this guy, 3 weeks it'll be this guy. So that's a running back room I try and avoid. Now, if we go over to the wide receiver room, there are 2 rookies here that I am very high on. And that at first is Michael Pittman Jr. I've talked about him, 2nd round pick out of USC, really tall, 6'5" body, and someone who can just go up and get catches. He's a possession receiver, so it's not like he's going to kill you with his speed or anything like that. But I think Phillip Rivers is going to take a hold of that Indianapolis Colts offense. They have two great running backs in Marlon Mack and Jonathan Taylor, who is a sleeper rookie of the year. And I think Michael Pittman could be a nice number 2 or number 3 guy to T.Y. Hilton. But we're going to keep talking about rookies and sleeper rookie of the years. This is Brandon Ayuk of the San Francisco 49ers, the first-round pick out of Arizona State. And I think if he learns this offense and takes a grasp of what Kyle Shanahan is doing, he is going to be scary in this offense. I am telling you, he could be one of the best rookie receivers and a very, very serious rookie of the year candidate. So if you can get Brandon Ayuk, stash him, and just get him on your bench, you could be in very good shape. But that's how this is shaping up. I'm going to go to the defenses, and we're looking at the Buffalo Bills, New Orleans Saints, and Kansas City Chiefs. The Buffalo Bills, easy pick right there for me. They have one of the top kind of 3 or 4 defenses in the NFL, and I just think they are very, very scary defense. So that's where I would go with that spot. And now we have my last pick is my kicker. Kicker, I kind of like to have fun with. Matt Prater and Robbie Gould are the top 2 guys. I'm a Bay Area kid, Niner fan at heart, so I'll go Robbie Gould just to have some fun with it. And now we're going to go through. I got a B+ for this draft, 89 out of 100, almost an A, so really not too bad. I'm pretty happy with that. If I'm going to read you through my roster, kind of why I think each guy is going to have a good year or why I think they're good fantasy football picks. And if I can come away with a roster like this, or you can come away with a roster like this after listening to this episode, you're going to be in pretty dang good shape. So I got Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills quarterback, and this is someone who's gotten better and better every single year in the NFL, and I think that is going to continue that trend. He's getting more and more weapons around him. He's getting more and more comfortable with the offense he is in, and he has one of the biggest arms in the NFL. Whether he can throw it deep or just get it into tight spots, he is someone who can huck it for real. Now he has Stephon Diggs. Cole Beasley is a nice little shifty receiver out of the slot for him. He's got Stephon Diggs from the Minnesota Vikings now with him as that number 1 receiver that he was kind of missing, not completely, but Stephon Diggs in that offense is going to be scary. With how accurate and strong Josh Allen's arm is, I think he is going to be very good this year, and he kind of brings that element that you can run and scramble and kind of either extend plays as he looks on the field, or he can surprise some people and get that extra 10, 15 rushing yards, which can be big in fantasy football. So we're going to go to the running back room now. And my 2 starters are Dalvin Cook and Melvin Gordon. Dalvin Cook is a top 5 running back in the NFL. I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to kind of lean on him a lot more than they have now that they lost Stephon Diggs. I think this passing game is still going to be good with Adam Thielen and Kyle Rudolph, but they're going to need to lean a little bit more on the running game, and I think Dalvin Cook is huge with that. And the thing with Dalvin Cook is, yes, not so much just the running game. Him in general, he had over 500 yards out of the passing game out of the backfield in the passing game. So that is another aspect to pay attention to. Dalvin Cook is going to be a huge threat in the fantasy football world, whether it's running backs or whether it's running the ball or in the passing game. And that is one of the main reasons I picked Dalvin Cook over Alvin Kamara. Melvin Gordon, kind of a risky pick because he hasn't had as good a years in the past couple of years because he held out last year, so you didn't get a full season out of him. Now he's going to a new offense in Denver Broncos, but I think he is coming for a vengeance. He stayed within the division. He wanted to be able to play the Chargers. He plays defenses. The Chiefs' defense isn't bad. They won a Super Bowl, so that says something, but they were never great. That offense carried that team. The Raiders' defense is not great, and neither is the Chargers, so he really has an opportunity to beat up on that AFC West, and I think Melvin Gordon could be a very solid pick. Out of running backs who have gone different places like Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon is probably my top 1. Now, we're going to go to my top 3 receivers, and I almost want to laugh that this is my receiving core. DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marvin Jones. DeAndre Hopkins is probably top 2 receivers in the NFL, if not the best. Just kind of depends on who you're talking to, but I think he's the best receiver in the NFL. Got extreme amount of talent, and now he goes to an offense that wants to throw the ball 40, 45 times a game. And Kyler Murray is a dangerous dual threat quarterback that fits the offense perfectly. So you have a rookie of the year who I think is only going to progress and get more and more dangerous, lined up with the now best receiver in the NFL, and they're going to be throwing the ball more than anything. Kyler Murray is also someone who can extend the play on his feet. So I think DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a huge threat, and really not that Deshaun Watson was a slouch in Houston, but I think DeAndre Hopkins has a much better chance for success than he did in Houston now that he's in Arizona. Now they play in a tough division, a lot of good teams in the NFC West, but I still did not change. DeAndre Hopkins can play well against absolutely anyone. We move to Juju Smith-Schuster, someone who had a down 2019 year after both his starting quarterback got hurt. James Conner with his running back got hurt as well. So once Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges took over for the Pittsburgh Steelers at quarterback and James Conner missed some games, all the attention went to Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, all of it. The defense is just keened in on him and were able to shut him down. But now that he has everyone back healthy, Ben Roethlisberger is back at quarterback. I think Juju Smith-Schuster might not put up the almost 1,500 yards that he did in 2018, but he's going to be a lot closer to that than he is going to be or would be to his older, or I mean, I'm sorry, got a little confused there. He's going to be a lot closer to his 2018 form than his 2019 form. So one thing to pay attention to when looking at Juju Smith-Schuster, I think he might be able to slip a little bit, not too much, but some people are going to doubt him a tiny bit. Now we go to Marvin Jones. The reason I'm so high on Marvin Jones is because of, one, he's just a very talented, shifty receiver who knows how to get separation from his defender and can really go up and make those tough contested plays. But this is a team that likes to throw the ball. Matthew Stafford, like I said earlier, was one of the really an MVP candidate before he got hurt. The team, yes, they didn't have the best record, but they were losing just about every game by 1-2 point touch. Like, all their games were very close. This is also a team that likes to throw the ball in the red zone. They're not as much of a pound team in the red zone, and that is going to play into Marvin Jones' favor. Now we go to the tight end position, and I got Darren Waller of the Las Vegas Raiders, and John Gruden has shown how much he likes to throw the ball to his tight end. He loves to feed the big guys, and that's the running back and the tight end. Darren Waller might have the chance to be a number one receiver in this offense. And I don't mean receiver as actual receiver. I just mean the top passing target. They did get Henry Ruggs, who I am very high on and is going to be a huge threat. So that might take away Darren Waller's opportunity to be the number one receiver or passing leader in this offense. But he is still going to get a lot of looks. John Gruden loves his tight ends, and I can't stress it enough that Darren Waller, I think, will be a top 5 tight end in this league. Right behind Kittle, Kelsey, and Gronkowski, there's an argument for him to be that fourth or fifth guy. Zach Ertz is there, Mark Andrews is there, but Darren Waller is no slouch, and he is right there with them. Now we go to the flex position, and obviously the bench kind of can be the flex. It can move and switch around, but I put David Montgomery here because if he can be the number one guy in Chicago, and all the reports out of Chicago are going that the Chicago Bears want to kind of shy away from the running back by committee. While Tariq Cohen is very talented and they're going to want to keep him on the field and get him his touches, they want to kind of establish the run more than they did in past years. It sounds like they're going to want to lean on second-year guy out of Iowa State and David Montgomery. And all the reports out of him were that if he gets the most touches, he is going to be a very good running back. He's not going to put up running back 1 numbers just because I don't think the team is good enough to do that. I think Tariq Cohen is going to get some looks, but he could be a very solid running back 2. That's his ceiling, running back 2, running back 3 guy. And to put in your flex, that is a very good guy to put in your flex, especially when you can mix and match. Some weeks you're not going to like his matchup. So that's one thing to pay attention to. I put the Buffalo Bills as my defense. They're a top 5 defense, if not higher. They have a very good defensive-minded head coach in Doug McDermott, and that defense has gotten better and better every single year and really is a huge, huge threat to the New England Patriots. They have such a well-rounded team. I talked about Josh Allen in the offense, and they have a top 5 defense, so it's not going to be easy to get past Bill Belichick and the Patriots. They're not going to give up that division just like anyone, but something to watch for as you move forward, because the Buffalo Bills are for real in the AFC. Now, don't need to go over my kicker, Robbie Gould. I'm a Niner fan. Picked him because of that, so there it is. But we're going to move to the bench. Talk about my bench guys for a little bit. Sterling Shepard, New York Giants wide receiver. I think Daniel Jones will be a really good leap, will take a really big leap in his second year in the NFL and kind of prove some people wrong, and people who were mad at that number 6 pick back in 2019, or 2019 NFL draft. And he showed, he played like a rookie last year when he got in. He made some stupid mistakes, had some interceptions, but he really didn't play that bad. And I think Sterling Shepard is going to be a huge beneficiary of that. They have Golden Tate, but I'm not so sure how much Golden Tate can be that number 1 every week, every down guy. He's going to need to spread the ball around, and Saquon Barkley is going to need a receiver to step up and take the pressure off of him to go out there and get that kind of big time performance every year. And I think Sterling Shepard could be a kind of very good wide receiver 3-2 guy. So another guy I could put in the flex and be very comfortable with. Jared Cook, I like to get a second tight end in case they really start performing well, because tight end positions are someone who teams really look for in the red zone. And Drew Brees has always tried to find a tight end, and Jared Cook is they had Jimmy Graham back in the day, but since then, the Saints have kind of struggled to get big-time tight end production out of that position. So I think Jared Cook could be a very big sleeper in that department. And then you go, not switching teams, but different position. We have Latavius Murray. And Latavius Murray is no more than a flex. Could be a very solid flex, or kind of, this guy's on a bye or he's hurt, we put him in there. But very good because, one, if Alvin Kamara doesn't stay healthy, which is very possible, he's a small running back, kind of scat guy who doesn't avoid contact. Latavius Murray is a very dependable number 2 running back for the New Orleans Saints, and if he's ever asked to jump into that starting role, that is going to be a very good guy to have, especially drafting him. I got him in like the 10th or 12th round, later in the draft. So another reason where you got to value these players. Yes, they could have good seasons or good games, but you got to know where you are taking them, because that is how you really get this fantasy football thing down and take your teams to the next level, is drafting guys at the right value. Then just circle around and finish off my fantasy football team. I got Curtis Samuel of the Carolina Panthers, and I really think he has a chance to be that kind of number 1 or number 2 receiver in that offense. They have DJ Moore, so he will probably get the majority of the number 1 looks, but Curtis Samuel will be that number 2 guy. He had almost 700 yards last year with 6 touchdowns, and I think this offense is going to take a big kind of interesting leap because it's now a spread kind of air raid offense. So the passing game is going to be leaned on a lot more, though they do have Christian McCaffrey. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of balance it out, because you have an air raid offense with the best running back in the league, and that is a nightmare for defenses. So you spread the ball out, and then you got people going down the field, and you give it to Christian McCaffrey. It is a nightmare. So Matt Rule is really going to have some weapons to play with, and that is going to benefit the whole entire Carolina Panthers offense. I think Curtis Samuel could be a huge threat. He could be a really good wide receiver 2 or 3 guy. So someone just to keep on your radar as you move closer to your fantasy football drafts. So I hope you got some insight as to where to value guys or where to not value guys, where to kind of avoid them. And it's a big thing in fantasy football of where you're picking guys. Like I've said, it's something that you can't take for granted or can't kind of overlook, because that's how you shape out a good, solid, balanced team. If you go heavy on the stars early on, you might not have that bench power in the end. So it's kind of just something you need to balance as you start picking your teams, but it's something to pay attention to. And it can really help you. So I hope you guys got a lot out of this exercise. I hope I gave you some good information on where to draft people, where to kind of avoid people, what players to look for, what players not to look for. Obviously, you're going to know the big names like Odell Beckham Jr. or Saquon Barkley or Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott. So it's not hard to draft those first 2 or 3 rounds. You know, it's easy to tell you to get George Kittle or Josh Jacobs, but it's those backgrounds and kind of the end of the draft where you can get that flex position or that bench player who's going to play like a starter all year and really take your team to the next level. And even those, it's where you win the league in those back half of the draft. And so I hope I gave you some names that kind of give you some insight as to where to get some guys or some names that you might not have heard of, or even some instances where like you're like, oh, I didn't know that guy's going to get some more looks or more of a value in his fantasy football this year. So hope I give you a lot of things to pay attention to. Stick around after the break, and we're going to be finishing up the show talking about the Jamal Adams trade and just what that does for the shakeup of the Seattle Seahawks defense, the NFC West, that is really boiled down to the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers, and really the NFC in general. I'm going to kind of look at that rivalry, look at what the Seahawks could do now with that addition. So stick around after the break, and we will finish up on a strong note.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Alrighty, GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast listeners, I am excited to finish up this episode. I went through a big mock draft, kind of one of the things that's really important to do before your fantasy football drafts, and I will probably do one last mock draft before we actually get into where you're really starting to draft. Before the season, I will walk through one more fantasy football mock draft. I would do a 3-part series, but that part is over. We are going to kick it off right now talking about the Jamal Adams trade that really shook the NFL just a few weeks ago. It was funny because I was actually recording a podcast episode for the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, and that news broke as I was recording. So I sat there and read off kind of what they gave up, what the Seahawks gave up, what the Jets got, kind of the details of the trade. I gave a brief little like, whoa, wait a second, what just happened moment, and talked about it for a little bit. But I already had different topics going on, so I finished out the episode and really was like, whoa, I need to circle back to this topic. I didn't, because the past 2 episodes I did an AFC and an NFC kind of overview, as you guys know, and now I've had some time to digest this trade, kind of sit back and think about what this means for the Seahawks, for the NFC West, and for the NFC as a conference. And now that the Jamal Adams, who is one of, if not the best defensive safety in the NFL. So let's take a deeper dive into this trade and the implication it's going to have around the league. So a few weeks ago, this trade really rocked the NFL, like I've said, And we're going to take a look at that. The New York Jets traded Jamal Adams away along with a 2022 fourth-round pick. So fourth-round pick in 2022. So that is 2 drafts away. And the New York Jets received from the Seattle Seahawks. So the Seattle Seahawks gave the New York Jets 2021 and 2022 first-round picks. So just like that, the Seattle Seahawks are out of first-round picks the next 2 years, as well as a 2021 third-round pick and safety Bradley McDougald. I don't think I pronounced that right, but he is someone who people are very high on. He's been a very good safety. So the Jets get another safety in return, as well as getting 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick. And that third-round pick, people might think, oh, it's the third round. That is a money pick for teams. Third round is a very good round in the NFL draft. A lot of core players come out of that. But for the Seattle Seahawks to give away 2 first-round picks the next 2 years is kind of absurd. I think the Jets won this trade. Yes, there's no arguing the Seattle Seahawks got better with Jamal Adams. He's the best safety in the league, or top 3 safeties in the league, and he fits that defense extremely well. They're going to twin him with Quentin Diggs, the safety the Seahawks got with the trade with the Detroit Lions last year. So, I'm sorry, I just messed up that name, even though I knew that name for the Seattle Seahawks. It is Quandre. I might still be saying that wrong, but Quandre Diggs from the Detroit Lions, who is now, that really is one of the best safety duos in the NFL. So the thing that's interesting here, that's one thing to take into consideration, is if you look back at the Seattle Seahawks past like 6 or 7 drafts, aside from 2 years, they pretty much always trade their first round pick. They always trade it back to get more picks later in the draft. So there is that aspect to it that isn't as big of a deal for the Seattle Seahawks. But to be giving up that draft capital for a safety, that position does not warrant that sort of draft pick a lot of the time. That shows you how good Jamal Adams is. But what's interesting is Jamal Adams had said how much he wanted out of New York and wanted to be on a different team, a more competitive team than the Jets. So for the Jets to be able to finagle the Seattle Seahawks out of 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick is nothing short of impressive. That is remarkable job by the New York Jets front office. But now let's get into what this means for the NFC and the NFC West. The NFC West is a showdown between the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers now. And obviously that division came down to the final game of the season in Seattle when the San Francisco 49ers pulled off that game in the last second. And it's interesting here because, yes, to me, this is a huge grab of we need to cover George Kittle. And that's what Jamal Adams is brought in here to do. We need to cover George Kittle twice a year to win this division, and that's what he's brought here to do. But I don't think anyone can cover George Kittle at all. And the thing, while this made the Seahawks better, they lost. They don't have a good offensive line. They lost some people on the defense. And the San Francisco 49ers got better this offseason. They didn't lose that many people besides for Emmanuel Sanders, but they replaced him with Brandon Ayuk, who I talked about earlier in this podcast, could be a very productive and very scary wide receiver in that offense. Their defense, aside from DeForest Buckner, is practically the same. But I think Javon Kinlaw, their other first-round pick, is going to be quite the force in that front line. And the thing that, yes, this Jamal Adams trade is nice, but games are won and lost in the trenches. Games are won and lost in the defense and offensive lines. The 49ers offensive line has stayed together, so they are still that same core, except for Joe Staley, but they replaced him with Trent Williams, another Pro Bowl left tackle. You can't take that out of consideration when talking about the San Francisco 49ers offseason. And the San Francisco 49ers defensive line is one of, if not the strongest in the league, with Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa. And you pair that up against a not so great offensive line in the Seattle Seahawks, that is a huge advantage for the 49ers. So
I think the Seattle Seahawks obviously have a chance to win this division. That is a game that can go either way both times. That's how good these teams are. But especially what's going to be interesting to take into consideration as well is going up to Seattle is a whole different ballgame now. You don't have the 12th man. That is a huge advantage for the Seattle Seahawks. So now it is just all football and football with these new games without fans. So that is one thing to take into consideration when looking at it. So I think the San Francisco 49ers still have a little bit of the upper hand when looking at this NFC West. And so as you look at the NFC as a whole, yes, the Seattle Seahawks got better, but I don't think the Jamal Adams trade really pushes them over the edge and puts them – they're a contender for sure because they're that good, but the NFC is so stacked and so loaded. I would take the New Orleans Saints over the Seattle Seahawks, the San Francisco 49ers over the Seattle Seahawks, arguably the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now over the Seattle Seahawks. So it's just – I don't think this pushes them to an automatic Super Bowl winner. Does it keep them in contention? Yes, they're obviously better. Their defense just got a lot better, but their defensive line was never that great, and that is really what puts the pressure on the quarterback and allows these defensive backs to make big plays when the quarterbacks are kind of rushed from this defensive line. So, wow, the Seahawks got better. I've said that over and over again. I will continue to say that. I don't think it's as big of a game changer as some people might think. And so that just makes this, the value they gave up to get Jamal Adams is just out of this world and just kind of ridiculous, especially when you think about how much they're going to have to pay him in a year, because he wants a new big contract. That's exactly what he said. And you give up that many first-round picks and you give up that value for a trade, you don't just let him walk in free agency. Jamal Adams is going to be on the Seattle Seahawks for the next handful of years. And so now you have to pay him a big contract that's obviously going to eat into other guys' contracts. It's just an interesting move by the Seattle Seahawks, who are obviously in win-now mode, as they should be. They have Russell Wilson at the helm. When you have someone like that, you have no option but to go for it. So I don't fault them for making this trade. I think it was a smart move. It was a smart move for both teams. But I just personally think that there are better teams in the NFL. And I think that is going to show once this comes to the field. Jamal Adams is going to make this offense better. There is no denying that. I will never deny that. Jamal Adams is a very, very talented safety, and he's going to make that defense a top 10 defense if they weren't already. But I just don't know if it was worth what they gave up, and if it's really going to be beneficial where they are pushed over the edge and take that next step to get back to the Super Bowl, especially when the NFC is so competitive this year. So that is just a couple things to take into consideration. I hope did a big mock draft tonight, and I hope that really helped you guys out, gave you some good insight as to who is going where, what to think of certain players, who are some players in the later rounds that you could pick up that could have a lot of value for your fantasy football team. A lot of good stuff to unpack as you listen through this episode. And then I hope maybe I gave you some funny little tidbits of what I think about this NFC West race that just got a whole lot more interesting with an athlete and player like Jamal Adams that can have a huge impact in games, but I don't know if he can shift the whole division entirely. That doesn't mean the Seahawks will be a playoff team. They'll get in, and he can make some noise in the playoffs. So nothing's out of the picture, but I don't think they'll win division. I don't think it'll be as big as some people are thinking, but who am I to judge? That's just my opinion. So thank you guys so much for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the one and only GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Grady Duggan, and if you have a chance, please subscribe to the show, write a nice review. It really helps us out here in the Fantasy Football Podcast. Also, if you can, take the time, please go onto Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, give us a follow. It'll really help us out, and we would greatly appreciate it.
Alrighty, thank you guys, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.